Should we talk about the birds?
Yeah.
Oops. They're a little hard to see now because it's so warm. They're beginning to make nests. And first I made nests on this, the side of this pillar. And then I decided to make this so that I could see them more. But they are so accustomed to this place that they go there. Yeah, they love the sun, so they're usually easy to see. So they're called Jacobin pigeons, and they were developed in India about 1,000 years ago. And they were brought to Europe in the 14th century. And at that time, it was an order of monks devoted to St. James who wore cowls. So the Europeans named the pigeons after these monks. So you can see the feathers go up and around. Let's see if I can catch one. Oh, it's a little bit hard to see because they're all in the nests now. Oh, there's one. You see the feathers go around in a circle on both sides of the head, and they have white heads. This one was born here with the mixed colors. They call that splash. And this is the I think this is hundreds of generations of selective breeding till you get this pattern. So they have big white tails, they have this round feather pattern, the white head, and then the colored wings. I think they are the most aristocratic pigeons. I think we can see there. You can see the splash one. They stand very erect. Yeah, I think they are the most glamorous pigeon, the most aristocratic. And I think they have been very inbred. It's the same with dogs. When you want to produce a certain color, then you have to fix that color by inbreeding the animal for some generations. So they don't reproduce very well. And I think that's because they're probably too inbred. These two are making love. I made this place for them just 2 years ago because I decided it's very nice to have them here, right at the entrance where I can see more of them all the time. They don't fly so much. They don't like to go fly in the sky. So I used to have them back there where they have plenty of place to fly, but they didn't fly very much. So I thought, well, this place will be okay for them. And they can fly, but as I say, they are more ornamental and decorative pigeon. As I'm saying, all the pigeons in the world were developed by selective breeding from the rock dove. And people think that they lived with people as old as dogs. That is to say that when people began to agriculture and planting grain, then that attracted pigeons. And pigeons, first of all, they can become very friendly. My idea is that they are our closest friend in nature. Because now they're in every city in the world, from North Cape to to the bottom of South America. And in every city in the world, they're in the parks and people feeding them, and they land on your hands with little children. And so, and I have to show you a picture I have of boys feeding pigeons in Chile. But they are not domesticated. And so I think, they are our closest friend from nature. I mean, sometimes squirrels can become very friendly in the city, but pigeons more so, and for a longer time, for centuries. Yeah. Should we? If you want, we could talk about these things.
Yeah, sure.
So these two figures from Bali, but from a very archaic culture in Bali. So the dominant culture is much influenced by Hinduism, but even in the mountains there are areas of a much older culture. And everywhere in Bali, they believe in layaks. Layaks are like mischievous lower spirits. They're not exactly like demons, they're not like evil, but they're mischievous and they're troublesome, and they can keep you awake all night. And so these two figures in this culture would be put on either side of your door. And when the layaks come, because they are lower spirits, you can see these figures are lustful, and that attracts the layaks. But when they come closer and see the faces, they're kind of disturbing. So the layaks are mixed between lust and anxiety. So they're held there. They don't get into your house that way. So that's the function of these two figures. And I can report it works, because ever since I put in these figures in my house, I have never had layaks in the night. These are from the Asmat people in West Papua. These are it's a vast area of swamp on the southern part of the island of New Guinea, and it's all swamp. I mean, these people only can travel by boat, and they have a completely isolated culture, but they have an artistic tradition that's very highly developed and has no influence from the outside. So these are shields from this culture. I have some other carvings inside, some of their other carvings. They're very beautiful.
And how did you get them?
I went there. I went to this place. It's quite a long time ago, maybe 25 years ago, yeah. I don't know the story. I don't know if you know the name David Rockefeller. No, Nelson Rockefeller was an important American politician. He was vice president. And the Rockefeller were very rich in banking. And his son, Nelson, was a highly educated Yale graduate. He decided, but the Rockefeller families are collectors. So they collect money and, objects of all kinds. So he had an expedition to this area to collect, art from this area. And he disappeared. So the story was, this area has, it's all, they were on a swamp and on a river, on a boat, a motorboat with two other men, and the tide goes very far up into the river, and then it was going out, and their motor died. So they were being washed into the ocean. And so the story was that he decided to try to swim to the shore, and he was never again seen. So, in the ocean there are sharks and there are crocodiles. So this river, so that's the one explanation. But the other explanation, and the Rockefellers spent enormous sums of money trying to locate him. Of course, they sent the army and airplanes. But the other idea is that perhaps he made it and was killed by the local people, because the local people had been recently very badly treated by white people. And when I was in New Guinea, first, in order to go there, I had to go to Biak, which is a small island where the airport was. And I had to stay there a few days until I could get into the main island. And I stayed with in a guest house. And the owner of this guest house showed me a room in which he had a huge collection of Triton conch shells. These are very big, beautiful shells that are prized and valued by those people. And he said that he believes that he knows one of these people has the skull of Michael Rockefeller, and that he would trade. He was gathering all these shells, hundreds of shells, to trade it for the skull, because of course he would get a great deal of money from the Rockefeller family if he succeeded. And I never know what happened. Apparently that didn't work because nothing. I never read anything about it. But then later, in the island itself, I met a missionary who had been there 25 years, and said that he saw a local man wearing the wristwatch of Michael Rockefeller. So if Michael Rockefeller was eaten by sharks or crocodiles, his wristwatch did not land and did not survive. So again, this missionary believed that Michael Rockefeller was in fact killed. So in New York, in the Metropolitan Museum, there's a special building devoted to Michael Rockefeller and what he collected. So we can. Oh, it's very hard. They love rain, but today, for some reason, they're not inclined. Usually they love to be the rain. These two are, and they're called, either they're called the lead beater or Major Mitchell cockatoo. They're from the central deserts of Australia. And they're the most beautiful cockatoos. I don't know if you can see their crests. They have a very beautiful three-color. There. Way in there. 1, 2. I think they're a little bit shy because of all the people. So they're very few in the country, because in Australia they've been protected for a very long time. And most people like pets. and some cockatoos are very affectionate, but these do not like to be confined. So if they become friendly, they like to land on me, but they don't want me to hold them. Anyhow, anyhow, for that reason, because they don't make good pets, people didn't import very many. And now you can see the three colors. Look how beautiful they are.
You have to spray them with water?
Oh, they love rain. They love rain.
How many times a day you do that?
Oh, at least once a day, but they would like me to do it, many times. Look how they enjoy it. They open their feathers. So they're called, they have these horrible names, like Major Mitchell. Major Mitchell was a British Army officer who claimed he discovered them, as though the Aboriginal Australians who had been there for 200,000 years had never noticed them. And the other name is the lead beagle, which is also, a kind of military expression. And I think it's totally wrong because there's nothing military about these white and pink birds. So I was going to Australia, and I told my friend, I'm going to find out what the Aboriginal people call these birds. And he says, you're going to go to Australia, and you're going to be trekking in the central desert for weeks, and finally you're going to come upon this group of Aboriginal people under a thorn tree, and you're going up to the headman, and you're going to say, what do you call these birds? And he's going to say, well, we call them Major Mitchell. Our fathers called them Major Mitchell. Actually, what really happened is that I was in Sydney visiting the Natural History Museum, and at a certain point I wanted to go to the toilet. So I go downstairs and I saw there were offices. So I said, aha, researchers. So I went to the office and I asked the woman there my little problem. I want to know what Aboriginal people call these birds. And she said, I'll ask the expert. For some reason, she didn't let me to go and talk to him, but she came back after 5 minutes, and she gave me a list. And she said, the Aboriginal people do not name birds after their military officers. They name the bird what it calls itself. When a bird arrives somewhere, it announces itself. So there are different dialects. And so I looked over these dialects, and when I came home, I listened to what my birds were saying, and I decided they're called Juckalyars. I'm very fond of them. They're very playful. They're the most curious, playful birds I have. So, when I first got them, I enclosed that little area with that grill work, so that, because I thought if they just leave them here, they wouldn't easily find the food. And I thought I would take that grill away. But they like to sleep there now. So I left that little piece of wood there. So when I wake up in the morning, I see them, and they like to dance on that grill work and show off. They go upside down and open their wings and their crest. And then they come, when I wake up and get out of the bed, they always come over to the window, look at me and greet me. And so they're very playful birds. They're wonderful to watch. Oh, these guys, they're shy because of all the new people.
And what is this we are walking on?
That's wood chips.
And why do you do that?
Just keep it clean.
Keep it clean.
Yeah. I clean it, maybe every 3 months.
Oh.
Yeah. And it's wood, so I put it in the garden. So it functions as a mulch fertilize the land. So these ones are eclectus parrots. They don't look good now because, they're rainforest birds. So in the winter, the air gets too dry. And even if I give them a lot of rain, it's not enough for them. So their feathers get looking poor. There's 3 of them. The males are green, and the female is red. I only have 1 female, but she's always in the nest box. Sometimes she comes out for rain. Today, no. I'm trying to find another female because I have 3 males and only 1 female. But it's very hard to find any. There are very few in the country.
Did you have to travel for the mail?
Well, if I could find it, they will ship birds by airplane, so I don't have to travel. Yeah, these 2, the one I found in Colorado and the other in Texas. So they were, the one in Colorado, I went there myself first, because to make sure that it was, a good purchase. But then the one in Texas, I decided I trusted this person. She had a site on the internet with photographs and so on. So I trusted. So they are about 3.5 years old, and so they're old enough to become fertile. And so every day now they are looking at every nest box to try to decide where they want to make a nest. So I think maybe this year or at least next year, they will have babies. Yeah, they're shy now because of all the new people and machines and so on. But usually they're very playful.
What do they like to eat?
They eat a lot of they eat this stuff, which is a commercial parrot food, and then they eat a lot. And the parrots especially like to eat a lot of fruit and vegetables, of all kinds. So every day I give them fruit and vegetables. The parrots, it's a very nice species of parrot because they're not very loud. And they're not very destructive. Sometimes all parrots like to chew on wood because they get minerals. And they have to wear down their beak so that it doesn't, it's like our fingernails. They have to wear down a little bit so it doesn't get overgrown. But this kind of parrot they don't destroy so much, as other species of parrots, and they're not very loud, so that you could keep them in an apartment, And the little cockatoos, as you can see, when we first enter the room and they're startled, they were making noise. But in the days you were here, you don't hear them very much. They're not very noisy.
Can they talk?
Well, I never liked that. I don't want to make them little artificial toys. But the parrots, I had a parrot that unfortunately died, who learned to say hello. Because when visitors come, they would say hello to the birds, and he learned. And then the other 2 or 3 other parrots were saying hello after him, which is okay. I think. But I didn't really particularly encourage it, It's amusing if you go to the pet store and a parrot says some, amusing thing to you. But I live with them and I want to hear their own language, natural sounds of the jungle. And they have a great variety of different sounds. So birds, like now, in the middle of the day, all birds have a siesta. They're most active in the morning and at the end of the day. In the middle of the day, they're usually resting. But usually in the late afternoon when they begin to get active, they make a lot of sounds and a lot of different kinds of sounds. I think what would be interesting is to translate, their language, learn their language. But nobody's really done that. One time I went to Antarctica, and on the ship there was a scientist studying the language of the whales. And I said to him, I would like to understand the language of my birds. And I said, how do you do that? Well, what he does is to record as many whale sounds as possible and to keep a note of, the situation when they make these sounds. And then when he goes back to his university, he puts it all on a computer and then trying to see the patterns and repetitions and things like that. So he said the only people who are studying bird sounds are at Cornell University. And so as soon as I came, he said, you need the program that they use to study these sounds once you record them. Anyhow, so I came back and I discovered the program was expensive. And a friend of mine was going to pirate it for me, but he never did. And then I discovered that they have not gone very far in their research. They have just studied a few words with a few translations. Because every bird makes a great number of different kinds of sounds. Like the turkeys, I think, make about 65 different sounds. I think ordinary chickens, domestic chickens, make about 30 different kinds of sounds. So even turkeys, they have only understood some of them. Some of them are sounds of fear or alarm, warning, also food, call sounds, also mating sounds, and so on. But, many sounds they still haven't understood. So they have not gone very far in this research, which I think shows how egotistical people are. They want to have the parrots learn our language. And of course, people have kept parrots for thousands of years, but they have never set out to understand what the parrots are saying in their language.
Do you talk with your birds?
I don't want them to imitate English sounds. So, yeah, I do talk to them. But I'm not trying to teach them to say things. Yeah, they're uneasy because of all these equipment and people. That's why. Because usually when I come up here, they love to be out of a shower, and they watch me. As I say, when I'm waking up and shaving and so on and making the bed, they come over there to watch and to make remarks.
What kind of remarks?
Encouragement, criticisms. As I say, they're very playful. They're the most playful birds I have.
Are there any games you play with them? Is there any?
Not me, no. They play with one another. So I wanted to give them Australian names. And I tried to study names of Aboriginal people and so on. But I ended up calling the male, the male is the more shy one, and the female is the more friendly one. I called I called the male Songline and the female Dreamtime. Of course, these are not proper names, but they're Aboriginal concepts that are very beautiful. Now, do you know this concept? For the Australians, the spirit world is the dream time. So it's the world that we make contact with in dreams. I think it's a very beautiful concept. And then song lines. Do you know the Australian Aboriginals have a musical map of the country? So when they walk in the desert, they see the melody of the landscape, you know, and the rhythm of the landscape, and they sing song of this landscape, and in this way they have a song for every journey in Australia. So an Australian person who wants to go 2,000 miles to the other side of the continent, somebody who knows the songs will teach him the songs. And he will be able to arrive, 2,000 miles away just by singing his way across the landscape. There's a very, very beautiful book about this by Bruce Chatwin. And Bruce Chatwin wanted to try to understand this. And he's a very good writer, and it's a beautiful book. But in the end, he did not really understand it. But I think it's an incredible concept. We have a visual map, when we learn the landscape of our neighborhood, we usually don't have a written map. We just look at things, and then we have a visual map in our heads of the landscape. But if you can imagine seeing the rhythms and the melodies of the landscape, you can imagine what a musical sense of the landscape would be. So I thought this concept is such beautiful. So I named the male songline. Recently, as I say, I always say yes to everything. So somebody wanted me to talk about in a little aesthetics meeting. And I had come back from Australia, and for me, the most magnificent building built in the last century is the Sydney Opera House. And it's the very center of the city, it's out in the bay, in the water. It's completely spectacular. It's also the most amazing building. And it's the center now of the city. It's the icon of the city. And what's very beautiful is the center of the biggest city in Australia is not a building of government, like the White House in Washington, but a building of music. So I in my thinking about Australia, I was thinking, this whole continent is mapped musically. And now the last generation has made the center this house of music. It's very appropriate. And also, it looks musical. It has this great. People often say it looks like sails, but in fact, the architect, who was from Finland, he said that the inspiration were swans. And when I went to this building many times, and I bought a number of books about it, and that was my idea when I first saw it. It looked like swans. When swans are resting in the lake, their wings are loose and upward, and it looks to me like it's floating like a swan. And so somebody visited him in his studio in Finland, and he looked out the window, and there was a lake, and there were swans on it. And he pointed to these swans. So I think that building looks musical and is the house of music, and it's the center of this network of song lines that map the whole continent.
Do you hear your birds as music?
Yeah. Yeah. I think they look musical, especially when they open their crests and open their wings. Underneath is pink, on top is white. They're shy now, unfortunately. Yeah, I always wanted to, all my birds I tried to get. I don't like the idea. I think very sad to see one bird all by himself in a cage. So I tried to give him a natural life. And of course, they would be very happy outside, but my neighbor would complain. And so I try to give them as much free space. They're here very free. And I tried to get pairs so that they can live a natural life. I remember a long time ago, Conrad Lawrence said, what's sad and cruel is when you see in a zoo, in an empty cage, a lion walking back and forth, But when an animal is reproducing, you can be pretty sure that, the situation is pretty good. And the parrots have reproduced two of the males that were born here. And as I say, the cockatoos are looking at all the nesting places, so they're quite happy here.
So,
And I think that if you keep animals like this, you have to try to preserve the species. If I have a number of offspring, I always find new homes for them so that the species can continue. And, some species have become kept by people, and they are in no danger at all. The little small birds called budgies, budgerigars. They look like very small parrots. They have hooked bills, and they're very, very common. You find them in every pet store. They originate from Australia. Now they are in no danger. There are millions and millions of them because people keep them everywhere. And also now all the modern zoos have the same idea. The old zoo was like Noah's Ark. You see two of everything. The new modern zoos are always working to try to preserve species, endangered species. So I think we said this yesterday at the aquarium. The Washington Zoo had this project of the golden lion tamarin. It's a small little monkey with a big mane, golden color. I think there were only 900 left in the world. They're from Brazil. And they for many years, they had a project there. It still exists in the zoo. So the zoo raised more than 800, and they let them out in the trees. So they're very high trees in the zoo, so that they can learn how to live by themselves in the trees, And when you visit the zoo, you always see people with binoculars trying to find them because they're really high in the trees. And then, so the zoo then takes them back to Brazil and can release them in the jungle. So I think many zoos are, in fact, working well to preserve endangered species. And with pheasants, pheasants are the most endangered family of birds. There are 50 species. Fully half of them are endangered. Partly because of habitat destruction, but also because they're big and they live on the ground and they're easy to kill. So people kill them for food. So half the species are endangered. And during the Vietnam War, there was a species of pheasant that existed only in Vietnam. They were totally exterminated by Agent Orange, that poison. But there were about 300 in zoos and in private, people. And we have a pheasant association, of course, So now our organization was able to bring them back to Vietnam and reintroduced them to Vietnam. And there are, I think, 3 species now that we are bringing back to Pakistan. So when you keep animals, you can also think sometimes it's the only way to protect them. So with these guys, who are very rare, that's one reason I want to have 2 of them and to watch them raise offspring to help protect this and preserve this wonderful species.
Were there any particular reason why you wanted to have it close by your room?
Well, I built this. I didn't build it. I had a carpenter make this room, and in my old house, I had a very small house, and I had a porch, and I had enclosed the porch. But when I came here, I thought, where can I put the birds? And I decided that, to put it here, because I would see them more often. I would see more of them. And to awaken to the birds, most people in the whole world have always awakened to birds. They wake up to birdsong in every culture. I think that's natural. That's what we should do.
Shall we go to your room?
Yeah. Do you want to look at the room, or do you want to go outside and see the other birds?
Maybe let's look at your room.
Okay. And as you can see, it's very quiet here. You don't hear the cars in the road at all. I don't hear my neighbors. They have dogs, but they keep them inside. So it's completely isolated and quiet here. So I was very attracted right away.
So what's the most striking thing in this room for you?
Well, it's a Buddha from Awa in Myanmar. It's 17th century. I used to have it in my bedroom in the other house. I think it's very beautiful and very spiritual. It's very typical, it's very distinctive of Myanmar. It's very different from the Buddhas in Thailand or in Vietnam. And So, Myanmar is a very artificial country. It was created artificially by the British, and it's the ethnic Burmese people living in the lowlands along the river, and then all these mountain people, and they never, in history, formed any kind of unity. They don't have a common language. They have different kinds of Buddhism. So it was never unified, and there was always oppression by the majority against the minority people. There was always armed resistance and so on. So what's been happening is these people who are in resistance bring things to Bangkok to sell, like Buddhas, in order to buy arms. It's a bad situation. And this should go back to Burma when I die, but they can't protect it. I think if I would send it back, it would just end up in a tourist market again. So Burma or Myanmar is one of the 2 places in the world where there are true rubies. In Myanmar and in an area in the south of Thailand. So originally here, in this compartment, there were rubies. And then it was covered by gold. You can see the little traces of gold. So when they, decided to market it, they first scraped off the gold because that's valuable. But there are traces of it still. It was originally covered with gold. In Myanmar, well, I wrote recently an article about gold, and throughout history, gold was everywhere used for the gods. And in Myanmar, there are enormous quantities of gold that cover pagodas. In the Shwedagon pagoda in Yangon, in the dome, it's completely covered with gold. And they say there's more gold. I don't know if this is true, but they say, the historians say there's more gold on the dome of this temple than in the vaults of the Bank of England. So everywhere when you travel in Myanmar, you see gold on temples. And then your gold is very soft and malleable. So you see boys who are taking a little drop of gold and pounding it and making a big sheet. If you take a piece of gold this big, you can make a sheet as big as a basketball court. It's very soft and malleable. So everywhere in Myanmar, you see in the market, boys making these little sheets of gold, and then people buying these gold when they go to the temple, and they put it on the statue of the Buddha. So this one had rubies under it and gold over it. So it's I think it is an extraordinarily beautiful piece.
What about this wall?
That happened a long time ago. It started a long time ago. I was in the jungle in Java, just taking a walk, and there were 3 kids, little kids about so big, who were tagging along with me all day. And they saw me, and then they began to follow me everywhere. And I liked these kids very much. And at the end of the day, they had bugs, they had insects, or they wanted me to buy. And I bought them because I liked these kids so much. But then when I went to my hotel room and looked at these bugs, I thought, hey, these are cool. And so after that, every time I saw a kid with a bug, I bought it. So, this is many, many years in many places. And in a few places now in the world, there are butterfly farms. So there are There are some in New Guinea, and where else did I see some? In Java, somewhere else. Anyhow, they're butterflies that people collect, that people can, there's a market for. They farm them, so they're not really taking them out of nature. So, for example, these are from a butterfly farm. Where did I find them? I'm trying to remember. I think that was in New Guinea. And I didn't want to kind of, like in museums where they put them all in rows and, in a kind of rational system. I didn't want that. I just wanted the wall covered with bugs. And a few of these, most of them I got that way, because everywhere in poor countries where there are beautiful insects, there are children who collect them and offer them to tourists. So that's how I acquired most of them. And then a few of them I did collect myself. Did you hear about the 17-year cicadas?
No.
We have a kind of cicada in North America that lives underground for 17 years. And then they come out and they sing. They don't eat. They just sing. In nature, the males dance or sing, and the females choose. So they sing, and the females choose, and they live months or 6 weeks. And then, of course, the females have laid eggs underground, and we will not see them again for 17 years. So when I moved here about 10 years ago, they came out. And it was the first time in my life I saw them. They were everywhere. There were millions of them. They were so loud. In the city, they were louder than the traffic. They don't fly very well. They're kind of clumsy, They're mainly just singing until they die. So, let's see. Here's one. Here's another. Here's another and another. One would not give the idea. And they were, they had red eyes. And unfortunately, when they died, the red disappeared. So you don't see these beautiful red eyes on them anymore. This is one, let's see, this is one I found recently in my little gym. So some of these, I found dead or dying or that I collected myself. This story of the cicadas, everybody was talking about them. And a lot of fussy office girls were afraid of them because, when you're walking in the street, they would bump into you because they don't fly very well. And there were millions and millions of them. Anyhow, one day, somebody put in the, I guess on the internet, that there was a professor in Johns Hopkins who was researching the ones with blue eyes, and that everybody could bring, he would be grateful that people would bring him blue-eyed cicadas. So that week, all the parents to get rid of the children, told them to go out in the street and collect these blue-eyed cicadas. Well, as it turns out, the blue-eyed cicadas were not rare at all. Like 10 or 15% of them had blue eyes. So when this professor came to his office, there were whole bags of these blue-eyed cicadas in front of his door. And of course, he had no research on blue-eyed cicadas. He had no interest in them at all.
what's the one you like the most? I don't know. Love it.
Well, I wish I could bring them back alive. It would be wonderful to have all these in my backyard, alive. Tarantula. This is a kind of insect from that family, of grasshoppers and cicadas. Here's a walking stick. We have them here, but much small. They look like sticks, so they're very easily camouflaged. Here's a, let's see, where is it? Here's a flying lizard. There are more than one. This is one of the biggest bugs in the world, this black and white one. Some of the spiders are very beautiful. Look how delicate they are. And some of these very small insects are very beautiful and delicate. And then the beetles. The beetles look like jewels, don't they? I unfortunately don't remember numbers, but there's this story. There was, in the last generation, there was a scientist called Haldane, who was one of the most distinguished biologists of his generation. And towards the end, he was at Harvard University. And at the end of his career, they invited him at the theology department to give a talk. And after his talk, one of these theologians said, you spent a life studying creation. What can you say about the Creator? And he answered, an inordinate fondness for beetles. I wish I could remember the numbers, but I should look it up. But it's really true that of all the species, there are more species of insects than anything else, more than mammals or birds or fish. And of the insects, there are more species of beetles than anything else. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of species of beetles. It is kind of strange, It's like God has a very big fondness for beetles.
And what about that painting?
Oh, that's from Mongolia. Mongolia had a huge population of monks. It was very Buddhist. Well, Chinggis Khan, who was the ruler of the largest empire the world has ever seen, that stretched from China to Hungary, at one point, he addressed himself to the problem of religion. So he invited people from all the religions to come to his court and explain their religion. He invited, Buddhists and Christians, even Jews and Hindus and Confucianists and so on. And finally, after a year of listening to everybody, he decided that he was most impressed by the Tibetan Buddhists. So he converted to Buddhism, but he did not impose it on the people. He didn't make it, obligatory, like the Christians did in Europe. But of course, over time, the influence of the emperor made a big impression on people, and more of the people in Mongolia became Buddhists of the Tibetan kind. And so there was a huge population of the men of Mongolia were in monasteries. And they spent a great deal of their time painting and making statues and so on. So when the Soviets took over, they actually encouraged the art. And they actually brought gifted young Mongolian artists to Moscow to train. So They also built an opera house in Ulaanbaatar, so they brought in high European culture. I mean, one criticizes the Soviets, but they didn't bring in American pop music. And so this painting it's a modern painting that I like very much. It has such a sense of movement. The Mongols had horses and rushed across Asia all the way to Europe to China, everywhere. So you have a great sense of movement, and it's very comical. Look at how comical these animals look, the dog, and then you have the birds and the insects flying, and look at this comical dog. The colors are also very nice. And look at how beautiful this old Mongolian writing is. Yeah, it's a modern painting that I like very much.
Is there a story behind this painting? How?
I don't know. It just looks like a couple of Mongol warriors.
I mean, is there a story? How did you acquire it?
Not this one, not especially. I just found it on a store, where they were selling paintings. I like it very much.
And what about that big penis guy?
That was from Ifugao people in northern Philippines, in the island of what's the main island? My head is a little empty. Anyhow, in the biggest northern island of Philippines, in the north, in the mountains, there were these ancient culture that made extraordinary terraces on the mountains. And they made these terrace walls of stone. Some of them are 10 feet high. And it's one of the wonders of the world. If you put them all together, they would be as long as the Great Wall of China. And so these people raised, rice and yams in these terraced fields. And they were what we Western outsiders call headhunters. They were never conquered by the Spanish or by the Americans or by the Japanese. Anyhow, I visited them, and somehow by some kind of happy chance, I had a nice connection with a man of more or less my age. And I spent a day with him. And so they live in houses on stilts, and so they have a ladder, and on this house, it was not that man, but his neighbor had two of these figures, to put the ladder on, to hang them on this erect penis, and I was very charmed by it, and I asked if I could. Well, the man was not at home, but I asked his wife if I could buy it, and she said, well, I will have to ask my husband. And then after a while, she says, oh, he can make another one. So she let me have it. These two pieces, in Java, there was a royal teak forest. Teak is this very valuable wood. And this forest had been protected for centuries. It was a royal forest. And so the trees are very, very big and old. And finally, in the last century, they were cut down. And then maybe about 30 years ago, somebody got a bulldozer and dug out the roots. And I had met a dancer in Bali. He was American, and he had danced in the most important American dance companies like Alvin Ailey and Balanchine. But of course, you retire rather early as a dancer. So he was, I don't know, maybe 45 years old. And he had gone to spend the rest of his life in Bali. He had gone native. So he lived in a little Balinese house. And, and he had bought some of these roots. And with his friend, Balinese boys, he polished them. And I saw these. And I was so taken by that. This one in particular, I think I have never seen a piece of sculpture so beautiful, both the form and the color. And I left, and I kept thinking about these pieces. You know, when I was there, I thought, well, why should I spend any more money and buy things? You know, weeks later, I think I was in Egypt, and I was kept thinking of them. And finally, I contacted him. You know, I purchased them, and so they have names. This one is called the crab. This one I've forgotten. There's an inscription in Balinese language that I can't read that would tell me more about them. You know, this is 800 pounds. These two pieces. They're very heavy. So to polish them must have taken enormous time. And they're very welcoming seats to make it really comfortable. You know, you could sit up this way. And this is really very, very nice. But when I'm not sitting on it, you know, I put the pillows behind it because I think it's so beautiful to look at.
So what do you do in this room? What is it for?
Sometimes I read here. Sometimes with visitors. That chair. Oh, that's a very long time ago. I had spent the summer in Bergen in Norway, and it was raining a lot. I used to go out and walk in the landscape, and one day it started to rain, and I came back in the city, you know, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was really rainy. So I just took shelter in a shop, and it turned out to be a used furniture store, not an antique store, just, you know, secondhand furniture of no value. But in the corner, I saw that chair, and it was broken. I repaired it a little bit. And the old man who had the store, I said, where does that come from? He said, oh, China, India. You know, he vaguely pointed to the other side of the planet. And so he had, so it was a sea captain in Norway who died, and he had no, you know, family. So that's how he got that chair. And so he didn't know anything about it. And I didn't know anything about it for a number of years. And then I was traveling across Iran, just a long time ago, under the Shah. And one day I went to the Golestan Palace, which is the throne room of the Shah of Iran. And he had 3 of them. And they were labeled. So they're 18th century from Kashmir in India. And it's some kind of Himalayan oak. And this is incredibly hard wood. So there's a piece here that people tend to knock off when you sit it. You know, you tend to hit it with your shoes. And I tried to, with an electric drill, to drill a hole to put a screw on it, you know. And this wood is like iron. So to make all these little perforations, you know, It must have taken an incredible amount of time. It's not especially comfortable, because this is made by people who don't sit in chairs. This is a kind of ceremonial chair. It's for a high official, because in Kashmir people would sit on the floor and cross leg only. So my friend, when I told my friend that I finally saw 3 of them in the palace, my friend said, "Careful, Sabak is everywhere. That's the secret police in the job you're on, and you have the force of his set."
About your masks.
Well, while we were just here, there are 1 or 2 things here. This is, to me, very precious. This is from the highlands of West Papua, in Papua New Guinea. And it was given to me by a man there. It's a guiding stone. So when he would go hunting in the forest, he would be guided by this. It's a kind of spiritual, it has like spiritual power, as it were. And it's very beautiful. You can see it looks like a turtle. It's a natural stone. It's not, manufactured.
Did you ever use it?
When I left, I had spent there summer, and when I left, he gave it to me to guide my way home. So it was a very precious gift. And this, everybody, you know what this is. This is the, what do you call it? Now you have to say the woman of Willendorf. They used to call it the Venus of Willendorf, but of course that's racist, And I always admired this figure so much. And it's in Vienna. And when I was coming back from Lithuania, I made a stop in Vienna. I was just about 3 or 4 years ago. And I was very sick. When I woke up in the morning, I was very sick. But at least I wanted to see this. So I walked to the museum, and the more I walked, the more sicker I was. So when I finally got to the museum, I just said, "Where is this?" And the museum was rather expensive. I had to pay like $20 or $25 to visit. And I just went up to the 2nd floor and I looked at the original. And then I walked out. But before I walked out, I looked at the gift shop, and they had the copy. And this is an exact copy. It looks exactly like the original, and the same color and everything. And it was, I think, like $125. And I thought, well, I'm sure if I look at the internet, I could find one cheaper. And then I'm walking back to my hotel, and I thought, shit, I'm here. This is where I saw it. I went back and I bought this copy. And so I read it. When it was discovered, well, for a while, it was the oldest. People thought it was the oldest statue ever found. And it was found in Austria. And somewhere, you might know, somewhere around 1930, I think. I don't remember exactly. So they first thought it was a fertility goddess. And then they also thought that this is why they had this racist idea. They called it a Venus. So they thought this is what a primitive people's idea of a woman is, a fertile woman, a pregnant woman. But, and then they were associating it with the so-called Hottentot people, the Khoisan people of South Africa. And many of them are very big. And that was also, they thought these are primitive people. This is their idea of a beautiful woman. All that is racist and stupid and foolish. But they think, this is not broken. That's what, it was always like that. The legs are not broken. So you see how beautifully it fits in the hand. So now they think that it was carried like that. It was a little bit like my stone, you know. So they think it was not a fertility goddess, and they don't know. They don't understand anything about this culture. But they think that, you know, it was made to be carried like that because it fits in the hand. And I think it's so incredible. Look at this hair. It has no features. Just these rows of perfectly made hair. What I wanted to do is make a big copy version in the backyard, somewhere in the bushes, because it looks so ancient. You know?
Can you say something about this wall?
Yeah, these are masks. Okay. Maybe I can start by saying the things that I think are the most extraordinary. Well, this is a candomblé mask from Salvador da Bahia in Brazil. You know, candomblé is one of the African spirit religions of Brazil. And then from my last trip in Bhutan, I went to Bhutan, I think it was 22 years ago, and then I went last year. And so this is from Bhutan. Oh, I think this is extraordinary. And it's not made for tourists. You can see it was used, you know, it was used in ceremonies. I think that's one of the most wonderful ones. And then from my first trip in Bhutan 25 years ago, I have this one and this one. You see, they are new. They're not antique. Oh, and this one also. This is a beautiful one. But I think this is the most wonderful one. I think these two are extremely beautiful. So all these are Indonesian, Java, and Bali, but this one was given to me by a dancer in the court of the Palace of Yogyakarta. So I think it's an extremely beautiful mask, and it's I guess you can say it's an antique. You know, I don't know how old it is, but it's not new. You know, it's not made, 20 years ago. And this one is from Namibia. I think this is an extraordinary one from Namibia in Africa.
How did you start to acquire these ones?
Let's see, I don't know. I don't even remember which was the first one I acquired. I suppose some of these Indonesian masks, because I went a long time ago and I spent a summer in Bali, and Bali was one of the most enchanting places. And I saw a lot of ceremonies, dances, mass dances, and so on. So I suppose that was the first. Oh, I know, the first one was this one. But maybe we can look at that later. That is a story with it. So this and this and this and this and this and that and this are from Bali. Oh, this one I said is from Java. And then these two, which I think are extraordinary, are from Mali. They're from Bambara people. And I think they're really extraordinary. This one is astonishing. These two look African, but in fact they're from Papua New Guinea, from the Sepik River people. I think that this one especially, most people would think is African. But this one I think is wonderful. This one is on a turtle shell from Amazon, and this one is from Guatemala. And I recently went about, I guess 3 or 4 years ago, to, do you know the Tanah Toraja people? They're in the island of Sulawesi in Indonesia. You may have seen pictures of their houses because they're the most incredible houses. They have these big soaring roofs like ships, and they're on stilts. They're amazing. This one and this one are from there, and this one. And I guess that's all of them, isn't it? Oh, this one is from Inuit people in Alaska. So it's made of whalebone. It's the wind spirit. So I don't know if you can see there's polar bear fur coming out of his mouth, which is the wind. And then this is walrus ivory, these two little things here. And then the skull, which obviously I shouldn't have. I was saying in the North Island of the Philippines, the people built all the terraces out of stone. So I said that people called them the headhunters because they were, they were very warlike, and they had never been conquered by the Spanish or by the Americans or by the Japanese. And I had befriended them. And with this one man. So he gave me this skull, which the Philippines the government is forbidden to display these skulls. So, he had them, but if the Philippine government police would come by, they would, order him to destroy it. And he gave it to me. I have another one in the library. And so a friend of mine who's a doctor looked at it, and he said, so he said it's a young Japanese soldier, this skull. And my doctor friend, looked at the connection of the bones, and he says, yes, it's certainly a skull of a 20-year-old young man.
So
I don't know what. I displayed it like he did. So in his culture, it would be in the wall of his house. In the other room, I have one with two, you could see it a little later, with two jawbones of a wild boar on a kind of wooden plaque. So that's what they do in their culture. And so I'm trying to do something similar, But I suppose when I die, I should bury it. Or before I die. Yeah, I suppose no doubt I should bury it.
do you feel any kind of energy, mystical energy, coming from the soul?
Yeah. If you want, if we could go and look at this one around the corner, this is a little harder to see. Well, maybe I could turn it. There, can you see this one? Mm-hmm. It's the first one I acquired. It's a figure. You could call it a kind of witch or something like a witch. And it's a very, very important ceremony in Bali. So there's these two figures, the Rangda, and what's the other one? My mind is a little disconnected today. The Barong. So the Barong is like a Chinese dragon. And the Rongda is this kind of evil female spirit. And it's one of the most important dramas that they did perform in Bali. So it's the contest between the benevolent dragon and the malicious female figure. And so what they do is they go in trance. They wear these masks and they go in trance. Of course, the dragon is danced by two figures, and they go through the village in and out of people's gardens, and people fall in trance. And it's a kind of cosmic drama that like the Christians have the idea that there is only one supreme deity, and he's totally benevolent. But it's not a very accurate description of the world as we know it. Our experience really is, or the Balinese experience is that history is a contest between the good and the evil. And it temporarily the good figures, but in time the contest begins again. So, you have this kind of open air drama that's being performed, this cosmic representation of this conflict. And it occurs as these two figures are danced through the village, and people fall in trance. And very typically, young men will take daggers, this Chris dagger, and stab themselves in trance without drawing blood. So this particular one, I'm sorry, what did you ask?
Yeah, have you seen this with your own eyes?
Yeah, well, it goes on in the daytime and then into the night. Yeah.
You've been there. You've seen this.
Yeah. Yeah, the first time I went to Bali, I spent a summer there. And what was I going to say? So when they put on the mask, it's a very kind of ritual. When they put on the mask, they go in trance. And then the mask is kept in the temple. And then when it loses its power, then they no longer use it. So this one, which you can see, it's not new. It's not one made for tourists. But it's a mask that had been used but had lost its power. And therefore they were agreed to sell it.
And how can they tell it's lost their power? How can they tell? Yeah.
I suppose, you put it on, you don't fall in trance. So the dagger, this Chris dagger, I have, 3 of them. This is a kind of sacred dagger. It's a very important place in Balinese culture, and more than Balinese culture, also in Malaysia and Java. So they were, you see these young men stabbing themselves with it, and there's no blood. You can see that it's laminated with different kinds of metal. And the most sacred ones are made from metals taken from meteors. This one, probably not, is probably found in different kinds of metals. I used to know which the names of these different metals. I don't know, but it's a very, it's a very great art to make this, to make all these ripples and in the dagger. So these are daggers that are considered often the most important heirloom a family has. They would be passed from, generation to generation and used in ceremony. If you make a contract, you can, like we put our hand on the Bible, they could put their hand on this dagger.
How did you get this?
These I just found somebody who had one to sell, somebody who probably needed money.
And all these,
the culture, I'm sorry.
Yeah, all these encounters, how in general, how I don't know how to say, is it easy for you to make contact with all the people you meet?
Well, not especially, I mean, I think if you're young and beautiful, it's much easier. But there is this one thing that very often, very, very often, I travel alone. And not because I wanted to. I wanted to go somewhere, and I didn't know anybody who wanted to accompany me. But if you're alone, you have a better chance to meet people. Very often when you travel, you see a couple sitting in a restaurant, and they're talking to each other. And of course, if you're in a poor country, the people know that you're rich. You're rich. Maybe in America, people don't think you're rich, but in Bali, Indonesia, you're rich because you spent $1,000 to come here, So if a poor person would hesitate to talk to you, because you're a closed couple. But if they see me sitting by himself, and, if I look friendly, I have a better chance that somebody would think, oh, here's maybe this guy wouldn't mind if I talk with him. So it seems to me often I met people that I would not have met if I were not alone.
What's the first contact? How do you approach them? Do they approach you? And what's the initial reason to say something?
No, I don't know. In Mexico, if you go to any Mexican city, after work, in Mexico, it's like Spain. People don't even think about dinner until 8 o'clock. So they finish their work at 5 o'clock or maybe 6 o'clock. They go home and wash. The women dress up, and the young men, put lotion in their hair, and then they go to the square. And then the men walk this way, and the women walk this way. and maybe they will meet one another, but anyhow, they will flirt and joke. And finally, and they eat outside, At 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, they begin to think of having something to eat. And then the musicians will come and play, the mariachis. Anyhow, all I have to do is go and sit on a bench, by myself. And before long, because they are so friendly, the Mexican people, somebody will come and begin to talk. Sometimes it's a young person, sometimes it's an old person. And if you're in a place where there are very few tourists, then everybody is curious to know who you are. And if all you have to do is look like you are open, somebody will come and ask where you come from. But it seems to me that so many now, in the 60s, young people wanted to travel the world. People wanted to go to India and Japan and so on. But now it's just tourists, and they stay together. They eat together. They go in a group, and they never talk to a local person except the tour guide. Well, I don't criticize it because I think it's a good thing. Even it's better than staying home and thinking that all the Mexican people are dirty and lazy. But yeah, and in the 60s, people hitchhiked. I know so many young people, students who would hitchhike to India. In those days, there was no train you could take. So you could hitchhike, or you could take local buses, from one town to the next. It would take a couple of weeks. But people would go alone. I mean, I would meet people all the time in India who had come alone, even women who had come alone. But, I think that people did that more. People still do it, of course, but maybe not as much.
All right, thank you. I think we can have a break.
Yeah, I should put this back. So this you saw, that's a Shiva Nataraj dancing Shiva in a ring of fire, and on his forearms, now I forgot the object. I know one arm has the drum of creation, and the other one has, I don't know, something of destruction. Again, it's the forces of the universe. That's a beautiful one. It's from Nepal. And this it's very heavy, right? It's a fossilized mastodon tooth.
What is mastodon?
Mastodon, like a woolly mammoth. This extinct elephant-like animal. I think it looks like a musical instrument. Doesn't it look like something you would? Yeah, this I found in Laos. These two statues are that's from the Asmat people in Papua New Guinea. You remember in the corridor, we looked at the shields, and these are two carvings. This one is kind of routine. This one looks like anybody could make it. But this one I think is much more interesting. They're not old, they're modern. And they were probably made to sell. These people are still very isolated, so they have their own tradition, and they still make a kind of art that's not influenced from the outside. But now there's a market, so every once in a while somebody comes to market them and sell them to travelers and tourists and so on. And so this one is the ironwood, what they call ironwood. It's a very, very hard wood. And in Papua New Guinea, when the missionaries came, these people made big houses with wonderful carvings and decorations. And the missionaries like to call everybody cannibals and headhunters, Anyhow, so they set out to destroy these sacred buildings, and they threw a lot of these statues from the sacred buildings into the lake. This is like 100 years ago. But this wood is so hard that finally, in contemporary times, somebody says, hey, at the lake, there are all these valuable old carvings. And they went to take them out, and they found them in perfect condition, because this wood is so hard that it was not destroyed by the lake. Well, this is not an old one. This is a new one, but I think it's very fine. I'm not sure if she's giving birth, which is what I think it is, or if she's holding a skull. But because, she looks pregnant, I think she's giving birth.
How old is this sculpture?
Oh, I got it quite a long time ago, maybe 25 years ago. But it's not old, it was made recently. And it was made. I think it was made to sell. But and then at the lamp, this one because I had to write it. That's a shadow puppet from Bali. I think. Can you see the colors? I put it there to see it in silhouette, but in fact the puppet itself is painted in beautiful colors. The shadow play that's really the mother art of Indonesia. So typically they put up a sheet. I'm trying to remember the name of the performer. My mind isn't working too well this afternoon. Anyhow, the performer, the master who does the play, has a very, very high position in the culture. He's a kind of shaman, he's a kind of priest, he's a kind of political consciousness. So he arrives in the village, and he stays there for some time, and he discovers what conflicts and what trouble and what jealousies there are in the village, so that when he performs the play, it's a traditional play of the Ramayana, but he works in political suggestions and accusations and things like that. So he has a great deal of influence. So he takes a big coconut trunk, which is kind of fibrous, and he puts in all his puppets. He has, I just don't remember numbers. Maybe he has 50. He has a great number of puppets. And he has musicians. But he performs the entire play. So he has a fire in a coconut shell to make the shadows. So if you stand on the other side of the screen, you see the puppets in silhouette. And so he performs this very complicated drama that takes all night, and he sings all the parts in different voices. So, he will sing in a female voice or, different devil's voice and so on. And I found it very hypnotic. Every time I attended this, I found I was in a kind of trance very quickly, to see these shadows in the night. So, if you see the human dancers, I don't know if you've ever seen, movies of Balinese dancers. You have these very, very angular positions, and this abrupt reversals. They are imitating the puppets. So in the Balinese culture, it's the shadow play which is the essential art. And the human dancers is a secondary art. When they performed, so when movies came to Bali, for a long time they were not very interested, because to them it was like a shadow play being performed by human beings. So around the shadow play, the other arts were developed. The costumes, the music, and the stories. So I got that kind of recently because I wrote about it a little bit on some article, and I wanted to I didn't have an image, so I thought I'll just buy a puppet and photograph it. But this one is a very fine one. It's a work of art. It's not a mass-produced one for the outside market.
So you have a very special connection to Bali.
I did at the time. I loved Thailand very, very much.
Mm-hmm.
I spent the summer, and then I thought I would. I went back a couple of times after that, not for the whole summer, but on the way to other places. Mm-hmm. The last I could talk about the Malay great Argus pheasant is for pheasant people. People who are interested in pheasants. Is like the ultimate bird. It's a big pheasant, and I first saw it in South Africa in a zoo. It was a walk-in zoo. So I walked in, and this bird was on display. So it had opened its wings in a big arc and was dancing in front of the female. And this bird was in a trance. I could walk right in front of it. And I think it was not even aware that I was there. And I thought, this is the most spectacular bird dance I ever saw. And I watched it for at least a half hour. And then after a while, I went out and I had lunch. And I walked around the rest of the zoo. And a few hours later, I came back and he was still performing. And so I kept thinking about this bird. And then I finally, when I started acquiring pheasants, I tried to find some. And there are very few in the country. And usually the only way you can get them is that the man who has them is dying, So there was a man in the South. He was not dying, but his wife had 2 operations on cancer, and he himself was in bad health. So he had 3 pairs, and he was willing to let me buy them. And I had them. So birds, shed their feathers every year. And so I collected these feathers and put them on the wall. You can buy these feathers, if you want to buy them on the internet, they cost $45 each. I didn't want to sell them. I just decided to put them on the wall. And then finally I got the captain, who complained that these birds are too noisy. And I have to admit they were loud. But as I say, I thought it was a beautiful sound and not a bad sound. But let me show you these feathers. I think these feathers are completely astonishing. You can look, see, it looks like light. Darwin said it's like balls in the socket, like ball bearings. And it looks like there's a flash of light. It looks in 3 dimensions. And the design, look at this intricate design, and they're made by individual fibers. So as these little fibers grow out, they match up to make these astonishing designs. So this is the outer decorative wing feather. And this is the functional wing feather, the strong one. But look at this. It has like 5 different patterns across. And look at this, these tiny little white spots. They're completely amazing. So when the bird performed, it opened its wings in a circle. And then it hid behind the circle and peeked out with one eye. And then these big ones are the tail feathers. They're the longest tail feather of any bird. They were the most extraordinary bird. And as I say, I had to get rid of them because of my cranky neighbor. But anyhow, I found good homes for them. One pair went to Canada, and one pair went to South Carolina, and one pair went to Florida. I think we've done the room.
Yeah.
This is, I told you, we have the home and grave of Edgar Allan Poe. And this is a copy from the museum of the poem, The Raven, in his handwriting. He had beautiful handwriting. We read, in America, we read Edgar Allan Poe in high school. Once upon a midnight weary, as I pondered weak and weary over many lost and, it's a little hard to read. I have to read it under good light. If you're interested, we could visit. I told you it was a very small house, and every time I go there, I'm very moved to think that this amazing genius. So in America, he's certainly considered one of our very greatest writers. And in France, because it was Baudelaire who translated him into French. So the French had a very, very high opinion of him. More than Americans, I think, because since we read him in high school, we grow up thinking that he's not, a great, great, great writer. And he was an orphan, and he died rather young. I always forget numbers, but he died young. But he was recognized in his lifetime as a genius. He didn't make a lot of money, but people read him and knew he was a genius. I think we finished the room.
Thank you.
What time is the interview? Is it getting lunchtime? Must be getting lunchtime already. I'll take a look.